Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This is the Voices of Healing podcast, and I'm your host, Tina Clark. Today, I have a wonderful guest with us, Susan Morrow Johnson. We actually know each other. We have a little bit of a past together, and she's a wonderful lady, a wonderful healer, and she is also known as the MoJo Medium.
True.
And today, we're going to discuss the healing potential and effects of connecting to loved ones. I know Susan has a particular story she'd like to share, but Susan, can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself first?
Sure. First of all, hi, Tina. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get to do this with you because it's you. And my name, yes, again, is Susan Morrow Johnson. I'm on the web as MoJoMedium.com, and on social media, all of them, it's at the MoJo Medium. So I'm easy to find. So yes, I am a healer in spiritual ways. I do not practice specific modalities and don't really do energy work, except I do teach meditation. But in my essence, I am a leader, a writer, a speaker, and also a psychic medium, and very recently a channel again. A channel. So these are my abilities that I share. And right now I'm really focused on helping humanity to raise its vibe and to move into the new paradigm that we are shifting into. And so I am recruiting other spiritual guides to help me do that.
Wow. So how did you get into channeling? So this is fairly new. And then define what channeling is in case a listener doesn't know what it is.
A lot of people don't know. It's a little more obscure than, say, a medium talking to people who've passed or psychic abilities. It's a little bit more obscure. But a channel is someone who allows a non-physical entity or entities to speak through them using their voice and their mouth and so forth. And the way that I do it, I always feel it's kind of a hybrid because it feels like they're not in me, they're not physically in me. They're just kind of coming in from over here, which is different from where a lot of other stuff comes in. And sometimes when they're talking through me, I'm still very much in control. And if I'm channeling and you hear me say I instead of we, that's me kind of jumping in to say something a little clearer or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what channeling is. One of the most famous ones, who actually calls herself an interpreter of source energy, is Esther Hicks of Abraham Hicks fame. And so she's been doing this for, probably 25, 30 years maybe. And so you can check her out to see more about channeling. It's not as weird as it sounds. And the experiences I've had more recently with, I've really just taken some friends and said, hey, will you be a guinea pig for me? And the experiences of channeling for them have been really cool, because if I'm giving a psychic reading and information comes in, in images and sounds and thoughts and all that, it's somehow different. It's like when I'm channeling, I feel like it's the same information, but maybe deeper. But the client really gets a lot out of it. They get so much, I think, more out of it. Mm-hmm. So it's channeled. It's really interesting. And I used to channel just with typing. So I did something called Mystic Mail. People would email me a question. I didn't know anything about them, their name, their question, and I just channel it through like that. So that's what they. Yeah.
So I think that having sessions with someone with your talents can be very healing. I use some of those similar abilities too when I'm doing my Reiki energy healing sessions, and I get information about my client, and I feel like that information comes up for a reason at this time. Yes. Whatever that may be. So whatever I get or receive or see or feel, I share that in the moment or at the end, depending on what my client prefers. But can you share some stories about how connecting to your guides or connecting to your past loved ones can really create a lot of healing for someone?
Sure. I'll start with a quick story about my husband, who's, excuse me, we met in 2014, and in 2007, his son passed away. And it was really cool that when we met, he already accepted me for being a woo weirdo, which not everybody is okay with that.
Mhm.
But he had the experience of two different women giving him messages from his late son. And it changed his grief journey in terms of letting him know that there is something beyond that and that love never dies. And that, it just made a huge difference for him. And so that's why he thinks that what I do is very, very important, because he was helped by that kind of ability.
Yeah, and I think so many people have doubts about life after death.
Yes.
And when you can communicate to a past loved one with someone such as yourself or myself, it's just affirming, and you realize that this person is not in the physical anymore, but they're still very much alive. And I
Right.
know for me, I can feel their energy and they feel alive to me.
They feel, actually, I think they usually feel very joyful compared with like a regular old human being.
Mhm.
There's just a tremendous loving, shining energy coming off of them. Yeah. Yeah. So I tell you what, the question I get a lot about people's late loved ones is they say, is he okay? I just want to know if he's okay. I want to know if she's okay. Yes, they're all okay. I really can't emphasize that enough, that they are okay. They're beyond okay. They're great. And yes, even suicides are great on the other side. And so there's no hell. So nobody goes to a bad place. There is an afterlife, and it is typically kind of free of the human encumbrances like sorrow and grief and anger and excuse me, regret, guilt, things like that. So another thing that people will ask me about that is, is she mad at me about this? No, she's not mad. She gets it. She might have been mad when she was alive, or she might have been mad if she were alive now, this happened, but that's the human thing, So it's understandable to think that, oh, well, if there's an afterlife, we're the same. But they're not going to be mad at you. And if they give you some suggestion of something to do, it's always going to be up to you whether you do it or not. They're not going to haunt you or be mad at you or, break something in your house or whatever.
Mhm.
And they're giving you that because if you do what they suggest, then it's going to be to your benefit. They're not going to suggest you do something that's going to put you in harm's way, or that's going to, cause damage to any sort of relationship or anything like that.
Mhm.
So that's something that some people are just afraid to talk to spirits. They don't like to think about them being around or with them. It's kind of funny. Most people are good with it. I mean, most of the people I talk to, because they're in that world, they're very happy to hear from their loved ones. But there are people who are like, no, I don't want to know. Okay.
Yeah. I think most of my clients too are open to that because it's in the form. When they fill my new client, I say, are you open to messages from spirit?
Right.
99% of the time they click yes.
Yes. And then that's good. And they know that most of the people that we work with, they know that that's going to be something helpful for them. And so that's really great that they're open that way.
Yeah. And I just think it's a beautiful thing because we want to communicate with our past loved ones. We don't want to stop that communication. And in fact, that communication continues in
Yes.
forms of messages or dreams or however they can get through to you, they're going to try, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And I have for many of my people who've passed away, I have a little symbol that is my hello with them. Like a lot of people will see a cardinal and they'll go, oh, that's my late grandpa, or they'll see, whatever it is, butterflies and find a penny, that kind of thing. So I have specific symbols for several of them. And that, just that can be really comforting, just to know that they're saying hello, and that they are still around, that, the world famous psychic medium, John Edward, he says that when someone dies, the relationship doesn't end. It just changes because one is physical and one's non-physical. And so it's a different way of having the relationship, but it's still the relationship. And that means you can still heal it too, if it needs it.
Right. Definitely. And however you help yourself and heal yourself affects everybody in the past and the future.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, and that reminds me, speaking of healing, and I know I've got this really great story, waiting in the wings, so let's not forget it. But speaking of healing, when you heal yourself, you also heal others, and vice versa. So you, as a healer, every time you do Reiki on somebody, get them messages, whatever, it is part of your healing as well. And of course, the person who comes to you is expecting to receive healing, but they don't know that they're also going to give something back to you in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that so many of my clients will have the same issues that I have in that moment. They'll be like, well, I'm really working on that. Oh yeah, me and my mom too.
Yeah, they either come to you because you've already been able to overcome it or go through it or heal it, or you're in the midst of it too.
Mm-hmm. And then we're healing the same thing. Yeah, exactly. So I think that, it's, you can be very much healed in one area, but we're always working on something. And so our clients really do help us to heal with our garbage.
Yeah, and I try to pay attention to patterns of things that come up. Before I started this recording, I said grief is coming up a lot.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, not only for myself, but with my clients, with my guests on my podcast, that's what we've been discussing a lot lately.
Yes, and that's what my story is about, the one that I chose to exemplify healing, the kind of healing that I do. So you ready for the big story?
I'm ready. I can't wait.
Okay. There's a woman I will call Jane, and we went to high school together, but I didn't know her. And in fact, she may have been in a different class. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Ran into her 2011, maybe at a class reunion. And we just got to visiting, she was a perfectly lovely person. And we just were talking, and I was talking to some other people that I did know a little bit, and some friends of hers, mutual friends, we're just talking. And I learned that her daughter was very ill. Now, the daughter was in a horrible car wreck. She was in a coma for 8 months. And then she lived several more years, but was never verbal again. She had a traumatic brain injury, and she was not going to get better, but she was still in there and was able to communicate through a computer. And I don't know any more details than that. So, so Jane was very about that, in that time. She was caring for her daughter and going through a lot. So a few months later, maybe, I found out that the daughter had passed away. And so I just reached out and said, I'm so sorry, horrible loss. I'm so sorry. It's terrible. And that was about the end of it. And then somewhere along the way, I felt like the daughter was saying, I want you to take, I'm going to give you dictation for a letter to give to my mom. And I went, okay. And this kind of thing had not really happened a whole lot at that point. I'd been working as a psychic medium for about 6 or 7 years then. And so I said, okay. I took out a pen and paper, and I wrote, Dear Mama, and so I wrote the letter, and I'm starting to get chills about this because it's such an amazing story. And not long after that, a few months maybe, I was supposed to hang on to it. And so I ran into Jane at the DMV. We were getting our licenses renewed. This is a random thing. Really random. I hadn't talked to her since the reunion. I didn't know where she lived or anything. So we're sitting there talking, and I said, listen, I've got something I want to send you. When the time is right, can I have your address? Sure. So she gave me her address, and I don't remember. After that, I really kind of forgot all about it. I did mail her the letter at some point, but I completely forgot about it. Honest to God, I never heard anything back from her. So it was fine. I hope it was good. And I had written a little note of explanation about where this came from. And, I hope that it helped her rather than hurt and so forth. Okay. 10 years later, I saw Jane at a funeral for another friend, mutual friend. And she said, oh my gosh, I just have never forgotten about the letter. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, oh, maybe her husband said, oh, she's told so many people about that letter. It's so nice to meet you. I've heard about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? So then she's like, you don't remember? We ran into each other at the DMV and then you sent me this letter. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So she tells me this story. And this is what happened to Jane. She said her daughter had been gone a few months. I don't know. And she said, I was feeling, she said, you need to know before your letter got there, I was feeling in a place of terrible grief and guilt for not being able to remember my daughter's voice. Because remember, I said that she didn't speak again after she had the wreck. She said, I couldn't remember my daughter's voice. And I thought, I am such a bad mother. I'm a terrible mother. I can't remember her voice. And she said she didn't tell anybody, but she was really struggling. And the letter comes and it says, Dear Mama. And she said, so first of all, you need to know, she never called me Mama unless she was like wanting something or she was like really cuddling up and feeling, loving and daughtery. And so she said, so Dear Mama. And then she said, I always wondered, we used to talk about heaven sometimes, and I always wondered if my dogs would be there. And so the first thing she said was, yes, there are dogs in heaven. They even have lop-eared bunnies. Well, I did not know this at all. I had no way of knowing it. When Jane's daughter was young, she used to go play at a friend's house where they had a bunch of animals, and they had lop-eared bunnies, and she always wanted to bring one home, and Jane always said no. So there was this little wink of they even have lop-eared bunnies in heaven. What a cool thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, that's kind of spot on. I mean, I'm used to being accurate, but this was just so pointed, So she said, so there was some other stuff, and I don't remember anything else that was specific. I know there was. But anyway, then towards the end, the letter said, look for the bear with 2 hearts. And Jane didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know what it meant. And so, there was nobody knew anything about her feeling guilty about not knowing her daughter's voice. So she shared the letter with her other daughter, her surviving daughter. And after a couple of days, her daughter invited her over and she said, Mama, come in here. I want to show you something. And so Jane went in and sat down and it's like, what you got? So the other daughter brought out a Build-A-Bear that the daughter who had passed had made for her. Jane had taken them to make bears for each other, And this bear had 2 hearts and a recording of the daughter's voice.
Wow.
It gets me every time. I mean, when she told me this, I just burst into tears. And so it's really, really, it's just such an example of how powerful it can be to be able to connect with your late loved ones. And I told my therapist about it because I was just so amazed. And she said, you changed that woman's grief journey. She could be here 10 years later, still feeling horrible that she couldn't remember her daughter's voice. And you let her know that her daughter was not only okay, but, oh, by the way, here's the present of my voice. So that's, and I'm not saying that she was like miraculously healed and everything's fine and Jane's never miserable again. I just mean that really made a difference for her, and it really helped her to heal that particular bit of grief.
Yeah, that's so interesting because my father passed away when I was 18. And I think that's one of the first things that goes. You can't remember what they sound like. And my mom used to always record things like on video and cassette tapes,
Sure.
and she was playing this cassette tape and there was this male voice, and I said, "Mom, who is this?" She's like, "This is your dad." And I was like, "Oh my God." His
Then did you
voice,
remember?
um, I guess, but he had a very deep voice and he still had that New Hampshire accent,
Yeah.
which you don't really hear you don't really hear accents when you're growing up. And so it was just blew me away. And I don't know where those tapes are, unfortunately. But
A couple of years ago, I was digitizing some old videotapes, and one of my daughters came into the room while I was working, and all of a sudden we heard my late husband's voice on the video, and it got both of us. I do remember his voice, although it was slightly different from, like, if you said, "What did he sound like?" I'd be like, "Well, it was like this," but it was a little bit. It just all came rushing back. Really, it was a little different from what I would have thought, but it definitely caught me. To hear his voice, and my daughter was like, "Is that Daddy?" Because she was only 3 when he died.
mhm,
Yeah, and she was just kind of like, it's great
yeah.
to have those things, especially like you didn't remember at all, and yet at the same time it can be really startling. But when something like that happens, this is in my family, we call those zingers. When
Mhm.
something surprises you, uh, and then you kind of had forgotten this thing about that person or whatever. You know.
Yeah, but like what I do remember, and I don't think I'm ever gonna forget this because he died when I was 18, but I remember how he feels. Like his hugs, I remember how his hands feel,
Yes.
when I would hold his hand. So I still have that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine my father's hands too. Of course, he only died in 2020, but yeah, that's a good point. It's a good thing to think about. In fact, let's suggest that to the listeners, that you think of your late loved one's hands. If you held hands with your grandma. And now I'm thinking about all my grandparents and my late husband and other people, and I'm thinking about their hands, and I know all their hands. That's really cool
Mhm.
that you mentioned that.
Mhm. Yeah, or how it felt to hug them.
Yes, yes. And I remember after my husband died, I had called it the ache of the empty arms, which is probably a common phrase. But yeah, I just wanted to hug him one more time and just feel him and sink it in more. Now he's
Mhm.
been gone 30 years this year. So, a lot of that's gone, and hearing his voice was really good. It's really good. So,
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't remember the voice, but it
interesting.
really hit me when I heard it. It was actually, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah.
My
That's
mom's like, "That's your dad." I was like, "It is?"
oh, I didn't remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's like they send you lots of messages and appear in your dreams, and that's all on
Yes.
purpose. That's not symbolic or anything. It's literal. And
Let me tell you something about dreams of your late loved ones. You can have a dream about somebody who's passed that isn't a good dream. And that dream is not a visit. So if you have a visit from them, you will feel good about it when you wake up. They will be happy in the dream, or at least, they're not suffering in any way. If you have a dream about them where they're mad at you, or they're begging for help or something like that, that's your subconscious doing that. Okay. So
okay.
I want people to know that, because it can be really scary if you have a dream about your late loved one and they're calling for help, or they're telling you that somebody's going to stab you or whatever.
Right.
Anything like that is, unless it's a kind, gentle warning, anything like that's going to be just a bad dream.
Yeah, that's a good to know because I'm not all the dreams are positive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you can tell a visit. It feels like you've been with them. You feels like when you wake up and you're like, oh, I saw my dad. He was at the zoo. We were looking at the elephants. Oh, you know, and you feel good.
I
So,
remember my first dog was a white boxer, and he was old when we adopted him. So he already had all these health issues. So he was long gone. But I remember having a dream about him. It was so real that when I woke up, I sat up in the bed and I looked around the
see
bed
if you
for
were
him.
there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I really felt like he was
Smart.
with me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice dog to come visit you. Well, that's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. Okay. That's a question I get asked. And, like, well, like I told my story about Jane, where they had dogs go to heaven and they have lop-eared bunnies. But a lot of people either ask me in a reading about pets or their pets will show up. And it's just not unusual at all. There was one lady that I was like, she says she's with Jim, and Jim is really small. Like Jim was a child. And then I said, is Jim an animal? She said, yeah, that was her dog. I was like, okay. So, I mean, they just kind of show up. And sometimes they belonged to the person I'm reading for. Sometimes they belonged to somebody they knew, and that's
Yes,
just,
I've seen dog animals a lot around people, just working on them and energy healing. I'll see a dog, I'll see a cat, I see a child, whoever wants to show up.
that's amazing that as you're working with Reiki, that you are also a medium. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Can you do that without working on somebody's energy? I mean, can you just like I do, where you just like are talking to them? Although I'm not saying that I'm not working with energy in some way. I'm just not conscious of it.
Yes, I could do it that way too.
Wow,
hmm
that's so cool. I'm
So
so glad. I need to get a reading with you.
I learned from another Reiki master who's very into the Akashic records. So the Akashic records is the soul library of everyone. And I used to do those readings and I don't anymore. But I learned through her that the reason why I'm getting this information is because I was opening up the Akashic library while I was working on people.
I see. That makes sense.
And so she told me intentionally open it up in the beginning and then close it at the end. And she said, you'll find the energy is going to be a lot stronger.
And was that true?
Yeah. So strong that people felt it, like the client would feel it.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
very cool. That's very cool. I love that. Now, I don't do Akashic records, or Akashic records, but I have, I've gone to an event where somebody was doing Akashic records, and what was interesting to me was that it's the result, or what she would bring through, was very much like what I do. I just don't call it Akashic records. It's
I think you're accessing it, especially if you're going into other lifetimes and
Mhm.
that information, that's all in the library of the Akashics.
Yeah. I don't do past life readings for a reason. I know a few people who are very good at it, but most of the time, it's a carnival kind of a thing. Somebody at a psychic fair is like, "Oh yeah, you were the Queen of Sheba, or you were Genghis Khan, or or you were, Michael Jackson." Please, I knew a woman who said that she was Mary Magdalene, and then somebody else said, "Oh yes, well Mary Magdalene can split up and go into different people and do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, come on, I mean, do we have to do this?" I don't care about those kinds of things, and not all of us could be the Queen of Sheba, right?
Right, but
So
most of these are more related to, like, say somebody had a health issue, a chronic pain issue.
yes, okay, now that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That does
So
make sense,
I don't find anybody famous. I don't care about that. It's
right?
just that lifetime that's kind of bleeding into this one. And you're
Yeah,
still feeling of the effects of whatever happened to you or how you died. And that lifetime can leak over into this one.
absolutely. So
So
you're one of the people I know who can do that, past life readings. I find that getting hypnotized and regressed for past lives is the most effective way. And
mhm.
I've never been anybody I mean, I've been regressed a couple of times and have come up with like, I don't know, 8 or 10 or a dozen lies. I don't remember. A couple of them on my own. I would dream I was somebody else. And in the morning, then I'd be like, oh, and I'd start thinking about it. And then the whole life would kind of flesh out. None of them were really famous. There was one who was famous in his time, but, you know, it was such a long time ago. It wasn't, I haven't even found him as a footnote in history. So, but there were past lives that I've discovered that show me where my current talents come from, as well as a couple of physical injuries. I used to have migraines, and I also had a chronic problem with my wrist. I kept hurting my wrist when I was younger, and so, you know, to find that stuff out is really helpful. And in fact, you know, psychologists and psychiatrists will use hypnosis, regressive hypnosis, and I don't know who did it first, but there was some psychiatrist who hypnotized a patient and said, okay, go back to where this problem started. And then they were somebody else all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful book on past lives called Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that whole concept is really, really helpful. Dr. Weiss helped his patients overcome fears in this life, irrational fears and things that weren't serving them, by healing them in the past life. And I think that's a fantastic way to heal.
Yeah, and it's proof that you're a multidimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not just in this lifetime, you've had many.
Yes.
And they still affect you. Or sometimes you bring in something from a lifetime that you want to heal in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that
Or
was the purpose.
you want to use, like I was talking about, and my writing and so forth. I've used those in other lives. You know, I can say, oh, well, that life, that was where I get my fascination with language and my linguistic abilities, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And this life, I was a healer. I was a healer in several lives that I know of. Yeah.
Most healers have had many, many, many lifetimes dabbling in all of the healing arts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have found that to be true as well.
The light, the dark, the middle.
And what about the ways that those healers and other mystics and so forth have been killed over all the lives? You know, there's some of us have a lot of, you know, burned at the stake, stretched on the rack, you know, or shot by a firing squad, whatever it is, hanged, you know. We have we tend to have had more violent deaths than ordinary people.
Yes, for sure.
People who comply with the norm, who conform. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something we have to overcome in this lifetime. That fear doesn't stop us from pursuing our talent, you know, using our talents.
Yes.
Because we've worked lifetimes on this. That is why you are good at what you do. Whatever talent that you have,
yes,
you have worked on it over and over again. So use it.
Yes, I love that. In fact, my whole thing is there's a simple 5-word message from your soul, which is use your talents in service. So when you're asking, why am I here? What's my purpose? Use your talents in service. And so those talents are a clue. The talents that you have are a clue to what your soul's goals are in this life. And so really digging into what you're good at and what you enjoy doing will point you on the path to what you want to do, what you are here for. And I don't think that any of us have just one purpose. You know, if you get bored or you get kicked out of this purpose, then reassess and, okay, which talents do I want to use now? Which ones light me up the most? And go and do that purpose, you know. And I think that's how you align with your soul.
Yeah. So back to where you died many times, you know, trying to provide these services or healing in the past, one of the ways I have healed that is to do a shamanic journey, which is a guided meditation to those lives where I died, for example, by burning. I have done this.
Fantastic.
And I would go into the event and I'd see myself in the event and I would rescue myself out of it.
Oh, wow.
So I would stop everybody. I would yell at them. I would tell them go away or stop, and I would
Put a
rescue
freeze
myself.
spell on them.
And I would bring them back with me because there's a piece of my energy stuck in that horrific death.
I am going to go do that. There's one in particular that I know of, and it never occurred to me to do that. I'm going to go do it. That's fantastic.
Yes, and I will tell you, after I've done this several times, because I do have a fear of fire since I was a child for no reason. It's not like I got burned or anything. So I knew there's something more to that fear. So I did it several times, and when I come back from that, I feel like the most empowered, powerful person because I got all that energy back with me.
Yes, yes. And so that healing of the past and bringing that person back with you, the person that you were and the experiences of that really empowers you. That makes so much sense. I love it.
So you can change the past.
Yeah.
Everything is fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to mention another book that I think is really healing and can be really helpful to explain things, especially if you do have a fear of death. We all do because that's our biology, but if you are particularly upset by death, there's a book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And he is also a psychologist like Dr. Weiss, who regressed his patients, but he regressed them into the spirit realm. So it's about life between lives, not reincarnated lives, not past lives, but your life between lives and what happens when you die and what you do until you come around again. And what I loved about this book is that after 20 years of talking to dead people, thousands and thousands of dead people, almost everything in it jived with what I have been shown and understood to be true. And he goes into great detail, most of which, like 95% of which made perfect sense to me based on what I know. And so I always recommend that book. It's a good one.
I need to read that one. You can do meditations to go in between lives or even into your birth in this lifetime. So I've done those.
I don't think I want to go to my birth. It was hard. It was hard on my mom. Yeah, I don't know that would be a great thing.
I was too, because I was a big baby. But back in the 70s, I think they gave mothers more drugs, so they don't remember really the birth process.
Right. So I was a big baby and I got stuck and they had to wake her up to help push. So I think there was a lot of fear. And I think the doctor was scared because I was born in the 60s and I should have been born by C-section. But he was not qualified to really do that. And he didn't really know that this was going to happen. So,
yeah. But how big were you?
9.5 pounds, 9 pounds.
Oh, so was I.
No kidding. Oh,
yes.
We're birth weight baby sisters.
I'm telling you, it's the energy. It's that big energy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, maybe I should go back to my birth and heal my birth because it was hard, and I'm sure that the thing is I had the same experience with my first child and the second one was a scheduled C-section. But yeah, and I've worked so much on healing myself from that it didn't occur to me to go back and heal my own.
Yeah, so. For me, it wasn't anything traumatic. It was just like being born and looking around the room and recognizing the nurse.
Oh, interesting.
Like on a soul level.
Right. No, I know that.
Oh, I know this person. I know this.
So after my first child was born, I was I was sick right away, PTSD and a host of other things. So I regarded her as this, very beautiful, very special little thing, but I didn't really get to bond with her right away. With the second one, after the C-section, that was a breeze. They put her in my arms and she looked and I looked and I was like, oh, hello. Yeah. And she was nice to see you again. It was just really clear. Yeah. So that's very, very cool. Healing. Okay. I'm going to do the healing thing. Cool.
Yeah. So, Susan, what are you up to now? Do you have any projects you're working on you want to share?
Oh, so much, and I drew an angel card today on Woo Wednesdays, which is my weekly talk show. And excuse me, you can register for free and I'll send you a reminder. It's at MoJoMedium.com. It's right there on the homepage. So I was doing Woo Wednesday and I did an angel card reading, which I like to do. And one of the cards was simplify your life. Eliminate clutter from your home and work activities to, increase the flow of something, blah, blah, blah. And even though I hadn't chosen that card for myself, I always tell everybody, if you are privy to someone else's reading of any kind, you hear it on the radio, you hear John Edward doing it, or you're whatever it is, and if it resonates with you, that's for you too. Just because he's talking to his grandpa, but you feel like it sounds like your grandpa, that's your grandpa. Okay. So just if it means something to you, it means something to you. So anyway, I got this card, Simplify Your Life, and I was thinking about, and as I like to interpret it for the viewers and the listeners. And I was like, this has to do with work, so clear your desk and get rid of some projects that aren't really going to the goal. And I was like, oh, shit, this is for me. So I always have too much to do. Okay, but let me tell you the really important stuff. So we talked about channeling. So I'm doing some channeling, but I'm not focusing on that quite yet, except that I will be doing more seminars with that, kind of like Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks. There will be that coming up. But right now, what I'm really working on, and I've always got the reading. It's just called the reading. And I put everything in there and the kitchen sink, So all my abilities, you get all the benefit of everything, and 20 years of doing it. But the main thing is to work with the future spiritual leaders so that we can come together as a group. So many of us, like you, have come into this time space to help humanity to heal and to rise up rather, to a new paradigm of connection and community, of more peace and prosperity. And, the divine feminine has been pushing through for a long time. I mean, I've really, really felt it since the turn of the century, I think. But you can see evidence of it even before that. But now that we're into the age of Aquarius, it really is blooming. And so the tumult that would seem to contradict that's going on in the world is the pushback, because that's number one, that's what happens. You start to go, I'm going to, stick this in the air and there's something here. Well, it's just going to resist, right? So there's pushback and resistance, but also our brains keep us safe in part by keeping us in what's familiar. And so it can be really scary when you see something different, even if it's a good different. And what we're headed for is a good different. And we're making a lot of progress. And so I am the leader to those future leaders to get the work done. Mm-hmm. And, not all of the spiritual guides can learn from me, just like not all of the people in the world can learn from one person. Oprah does a good job. She probably reaches 1 billion people, but, not just one person can do it all. So I'm doing what I was called to do, what I came to do.
Yeah, I think the best work that's being done is the work that's not getting any attention.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yes.
Well, and I think everybody who is a teacher or a guide needs to expand their work in some way, reach more people, do more of it, change your, maybe leave your job and start doing it full time. But we all need to do more of it in order to get this thing birthed.
That makes sense, because ever since I launched this podcast, I've had a lot of people wanting to come on. So it's been super easy. I haven't had to look for guests. I haven't had to ask people, please come on my show.
Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
That
So
is
to
great.
so to me, universe is saying this is what you need to be doing right now.
That's right. When the doors are flying open, you know that that's your destiny saying, good going, keep going that way.
Yeah.
And when the doors are slamming and shut in your face, it's like, oh, I'm out of alignment with my soul's goals. I better pivot and do something different, do something that does work.
Or something is percolating in the background.
Good
And
point.
that's my signal to step back and just allow and see what happens instead of pushing and trying to make something happen and
Love
it's
that. Brilliant.
stalling. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at now. Like with the podcast, like, yeah, green light, but everything else is just kind of like, okay, where nothing's really happening there. And now I'm just going to sit back and I just say, Spirit, give me a sign and I'll wait and then I'll wait for the signs for movement or action.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's the way to do it. That's perfect. That is similar to what I'm saying. And when the doors are slamming in your face and you get kicked out, like if you get fired, for example, but you can get kicked out of anything. Ding, universe goes, bye. You're not listening to what we're guiding you to do, so you can't do that anymore. And so when that happens, it's important to reassess. Like I said about figuring out which talents light you up right now. If you've kind of worn these out and it stops working, ding, bye, then you go, okay, all right, regroup with the talents. What are they again? And which ones ooh, I love that. I love to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. Okay, I love that. And, you have your little pile and then you go, all right, what does this become? What's my new recipe?
Mm-hmm,
And you
mm-hmm.
bake that cake and then you go for it. So that's very similar to what you're saying about kind of stepping back and waiting for the signs, but you can be active about it too. You can be proactive in terms of journaling, meditating, paying attention, sitting
Right.
and thinking and listening and just paying attention.
Yeah. For me, I feel like there's something percolating in the background that I don't know about.
Yeah,
And then
it's
when it,
exciting.
whatever that is, but you could get stressed out waiting, you feel like there's nothing happening right now. And spirit, I don't know if spirit does this to you, but spirit puts me on breaks.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they'll literally be like, there's nothing going on for you right now. And you just need to do the waiting game or work on yourself or whatever right now. And I've had it happen to other intuitives too, who have come to
Yeah.
me and said, did I lose my abilities? I'm like, no, you're being put on a break.
Mm-hmm. It's time for you to go take a nap. So enjoy yourself. Do something else you like for a while. It'll come back. You got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't lose the abilities once you have them.
No.
Maybe if you got hit in the head, maybe I don't want to tempt the fates. Tweet.
It might get better.
That's a good point. Maybe we should try this. There was another thing about what you were just saying about, I wanted to say that not long ago, I was journaling and doing like Q&A where I like ask subconscious and spirit and guides and so forth. And I said, why am I late? And why do I feel like I'm late? And they said, no, you're not late. You feel that way because that's your own self-doubt. And then the rest of it was just remember, you could not have been done have until you could not have been done have what you are and are doing and having or something like that until right here now. And I was like, oh, that was so powerful. And there's no here and now. I mean, the time and space are not real, right? But right here now in this moment, in this place, in this sense, it just was really powerful to me because it made me feel like, oh, that's why I'm not late. I needed to do what I did and need to do what I've done. And so that I could be here now and doing right here now, and I
Yeah.
love that. Love that
Everything's perfect
alignment feeling.
timing. Perfect
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your take on it's time for you to rest. I love that.
Yeah. Take a break.
I know
You
I've
know?
missed that many times.
Yeah, me too. I tend to push hard, and I think that's why I have these periods where nothing really happens. I need to
And-
take a break.
but you've really learned to take that break. And that's great.
Yeah. So if you would like to work with Susan, all of her information is going to be in the show notes. You can find her at MoJo Medium, very easy to find. And thank you so much, Susan, for being on the show.
Thank you. Tina, this has just been so much fun. And I love getting to visit with you.
Me too.